Amber almost didn't stop. She had one meal, one daughter waiting at home, and a stranger sitting in the dark who looked like he wouldn't survive the walk to a shelter. She knelt down anyway. She had no idea the man she just fed had killed 2 of his own bodyguards to survive that night, or that by morning his enemies would be watching her building too. The restaurant's back door clicked shut behind her, and the cold hit Amber Hayes like it always did, fast, and straight through her jacket. 11 hours on her feet. A double shift she hadn't asked for but couldn't afford to turn down. Her hands were cracked from the dish sink, and the small foam container tucked against her chest was the only warm thing she was carrying. A phone buzzed once in her pocket. "Mommy, are you bringing dinner?" Amber looked down at the container like it might answer for her. "Yes, baby," she said out loud to no one. "I'm bringing it." She started walking. That was when she saw him. He was sitting against the brick wall across the street, knees pulled up, one hand pressed flat against his side like he was holding something together that didn't want to stay closed. His dark hair was matted at the temple with something that had dried rust-colored. His shirt was torn at the collar. Beside him, propped against a folded blanket, was a strip of cardboard. "Anything helps, thanks." Amber had walked past 100 men like this. She told herself that as her feet kept moving. Then she stopped. But she thought about the empty shelf in their refrigerator, the one that hadn't held anything but ketchup and half a stick of butter in 3 days. She thought about rent, which was 11 days late, and the landlord's note taped to her door that she still hadn't answered. Then she looked at the man again. He hadn't moved to beg from anyone. He hadn't lifted his cup. He wasn't even watching the street the way the others usually did, scanning for someone who might stop. He was just enduring it, like he'd already decided no one would. Amber crossed the street before she could talk herself out of it. Up close, he looked worse. The bruising along his jaw had started to purple. His knuckles were split, and under the hand pressed to his ribs, she caught a flash of something dark soaking through the fabric that wasn't dirt. He didn't ask her for anything. He didn't even lift his head until her shadow fell over him. Amber knelt and held the container out. Here, his eyes came up slowly, like it cost him something. He looked at the food the way a man looks at something he's been told isn't real. "That's yours," he said. His voice was rough, low, careful, like he was rationing it. "Not anymore." He didn't take it. "Don't you have someone waiting for this?" Amber's hand didn't move. For a second, she considered lying. She didn't. "My daughter." Something shifted in his face. He tried to push the container back toward her. "Then you should. She's hungry too." Amber cut him off, gentle but final. "But you're starving." He looked at her for a long moment, like he was trying to work out what kind of person did this and expected nothing in return. "Why would you do that?" Amber stood, already pulling her jacket tighter, already stepping back into the cold that was waiting for her the second she stopped moving. "Because you're hungry." She was 3 steps away when she heard him say something behind her. A word, maybe her thanks, refused before it could land. But she didn't turn around. If she turned around, she'd start thinking about what she'd just given away, and she didn't have room in her chest for that tonight. The walk home took 18 minutes. Amber spent all of them not thinking about food. Their apartment was 2 rooms and a bathroom with a door that didn't fully latch, but the lamp in the front window was on, which meant Lily had waited up. "Mommy!" Lily met her at the door in socks with a hole in one toe, already talking before Amber got her coat off. "Did you bring dinner? I saved you the good spot on the couch. I already ate at the restaurant, baby." The lie came easily. It always did. "You go ahead." Lily studied her for a second too long. 8 years old and already too good at reading her mother's face. But she didn't push it. Instead, she reached into her pocket and produced half a cookie wrapped in a napkin, slightly crushed. "I saved you this, in case." Amber's throat tightened. She took it like it was something precious because it was. "Thank you, Lilybug." She ate it standing at the counter after Lily fell asleep, checked the refrigerator out of habit, even though she already knew what was in it, and didn't let herself cry until the lights were off. 2 blocks from the restaurant, the man Amber had fed sat with the empty container balanced on his knee, and for the first time in 6 hours allowed himself to breathe. He was not in fact helpless. He had chosen this. The torn shirt, the abandoned phone lying somewhere in a storm drain 3 streets back, the watch he'd pried off his own wrist and dropped down a sewer grate before he'd even stopped bleeding. Every piece of him that could be tracked, he had shed on purpose. 6 hours ago, his convoy had been hit 2 blocks from his own front door. His driver was dead. 2 of his men were dead or scattered, and the timing, the precision of it, told him everything he needed to know, and nothing he wanted to. Someone inside his own organization had handed his route to the people trying to kill him. Until he knew who, he couldn't go home. He couldn't call anyone. He couldn't trust a single face he might recognize. So he had disappeared into the one place no one would think to look for. The street, invisible, one more shape people crossed to avoid. 12 people had walked past him tonight without slowing down. One woman, who had almost nothing herself, had knelt down and given him what she did have. He looked at the empty container for a long moment. "Who are you?" he said quietly, to no one. Across the street, in the mouth of an alley, a black sedan idled with its lights off. It had been there for the last 11 minutes. It hadn't moved. Amber didn't know who she'd just fed. She only knew he was hungry. That's the kind of person she is. And honestly, that's rare these days. If the story has already pulled you in, don't scroll past it. Follow now so you don't miss what happens when kindness meets consequences. Comment "hungry man" if you think Daniel's about to change her life forever. The alarm went off at 6 and Amber was already awake to shut it off. She'd slept maybe 4 hours. Long enough to dream about the man against the wall. Not long enough to stop thinking about him the second she opened her eyes. She pushed it aside the way she pushed aside most things she didn't have time for, and got Lily up, fed and dressed in the 22 minutes she'd learned it actually took, not the 30 she always planned for. "Socks," she said, tying her own shoes by the door. "Both feet, Lilybug. They don't match. Nobody's grading your socks." Lily grinned and pulled them on anyway, and for a moment the apartment felt almost normal. The rent notice still taped to the door, the refrigerator still empty, but Lily laughing over cereal like none of it touched her yet. Amber wanted to keep it that way for as long as she possibly could. She was doing the math on groceries versus the electric bill again when she heard the first engine. Low, close, idling, not passing, then a second, then a third. Amber crossed the window out of habit more than concern. The street didn't get traffic like this, not ever, and felt her stomach drop. 3 black SUVs, glossy even in the grey morning light, had pulled up directly outside the building. Doors opened in near unison. 4 men stepped out in dark suits, moving with a kind of unhurried purpose that told her immediately this wasn't a delivery, wasn't a mistake, wasn't anything ordinary. "Lily, go finish getting your bag." "I already, now please." Something in her voice made Lily go without arguing. One of the men started toward the building's front entrance. Amber's pulse climbed into her throat. Then the rear door of the middle SUV opened and a 5th man stepped out, and Amber forgot for a second how to breathe. It was him, not the man from the sidewalk. Not the torn shirt, not the blood at his temple, not the hand pressed to his ribs like it was the only thing holding him upright. This man wore a black suit that fit him like it had been built around his body, a watch that caught the light even under a flat morning sky. Shoes too clean for a street he clearly hadn't walked on foot. His face was the same. His eyes were the same. Everything else about him had changed. The knock came 30 seconds later. Amber opened the door on the chain, just enough to see him standing in the hallway alone. His men had stayed back, out of sight, which she understood later was deliberate. "You fed me last night," he said. Amber's hand tightened on the door. Past him, down the stairwell, she caught the shape of 2 men in suits stationed at the building's entrance, and understanding arrived all at once, cold and complete. This was not a man returning to say thank you. "My name is Daniel Moretti," he said. Amber had heard that name before. Everyone in the city had heard that name before, usually followed by a story that ended badly for someone. Her first instinct was fear, sharp and immediate. Her second was to shut the door. She'd gotten it halfway closed when he spoke again. Quiet, not moving to stop her. "I'm not here to hurt you." Amber didn't open the door further, but she didn't close it either. "Someone tried to kill me last night," Daniel said. "My security was compromised. Someone close to me gave up my route. I lost people I trusted. I had to disappear before I could find out who." He paused. "That's why you found me the way you did. Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the only person who helped me without knowing what I was." Amber's grip on the door eased just slightly. "Everyone saw a homeless man. Everyone saw a dangerous man," Daniel corrected. You saw someone who was hungry. She didn't have an answer for that. He reached into his jacket and held out a plain white envelope, thick enough that she didn't need to open it to know what was inside. Amber looked at it, then at him. I didn't sell you dinner. Something moved behind Daniel's eyes. Not quite surprise, but close to it. He was used to people taking what he offered, usually fast, usually without meeting his eyes while they did it. Then, what do you want? He asked, and it wasn't rhetorical. Amber thought about Lily in the next room, zipping a backpack that had a broken strap. Amber still hadn't fixed. She thought about the men downstairs, about the name Moretti, and everything it dragged behind it. I need you to leave my daughter out of this, she said. Whatever this is. You have my word. He said it simply, without performance, and something about the plainness of it made her believe him more than she wanted to. Dial to go. Amber closed the door most of the way, then stopped, watching through the gap as he reached the top of the stairwell. The man in a dark suit, older, gray at the temples, the kind of stillness about him that read as command rather than nerves, stepped up beside Daniel and lowered his voice. Boss, we've got another problem. What? The man held out a phone screen angled toward Daniel. Amber couldn't see it from where she stood, but she saw Daniel's face change, the controlled expression cracking for just a second into something harder, something colder. Who took this? Daniel said. Unknown. It came in an hour ago. No message. Just the photo. Daniel didn't answer right away. He glanced back down the hallway toward Amber's door, though she'd already pulled it shut by then and didn't see it. On the phone screen, time-stamped from the night before, was a photograph of Amber, walking home, alone, unaware, taken from across the street with a long lens. Someone had been watching her before she'd even known his name. By noon, Daniel was 3 floors below the city, in a room with no windows, listening to men he'd trusted for years explain, one by one, why none of them had betrayed him. The attack had required his route, his timing, the exact minute his convoy would clear the intersection where the shooters were waiting. That information had existed in exactly 4 places, 4 people. He'd built his organization on the belief that loyalty could be engineered through fear, and now he sat across from the 4 men closest to him, searching their faces for the one who'd decided fear wasn't enough anymore. Victor Kane sat closest to him, as he always did, 15 years at Daniel's side, calm in a way that had never once cracked. Not during wars with rival families, not during the funeral of Daniel's father, not now. He offered names, timelines, theories, helpful, measured, exactly what a devoted lieutenant should offer. That was, Daniel thought, precisely what made him impossible to rule out. A man who panicked was easy to read. A man who stayed discomposed while his boss searched the room for a traitor was either innocent or better at this than anyone Daniel had ever met. He gave the room nothing. He watched and said little. By the time the meeting ended, he had no answer, only a list narrowed by nothing at all. He went back to Amber's that evening. She opened the door further this time, though not by much, and there was something guarded in the set of her shoulders that hadn't been there that morning. Why are you here again? I need to ask you something about last night. Why? The word came out sharper than she probably meant it to. Daniel didn't flinch from it. Because I think someone followed me to that street, he said, and I think you might have seen something before I did. Amber crossed her arms, but she didn't close the door. She thought back, the shift, the closing routine, the walk out the back before she'd ever noticed him against the wall. There was a car, she said slowly, behind the restaurant. Before I left, she hadn't thought about it once since. It had seemed like nothing. A car parked where cars parked sometimes. A black sedan. A man was standing next to it, like he was waiting for someone. Did you see his face? No, but the car had this. She frowned, reaching for it. Emblem. On the door. Silver. I noticed it because it looked expensive for that street. Daniel went still. He knew that emblem. He'd seen it on exactly one vehicle he could think of, registered to exactly one man whose face he'd been studying for the last 6 hours, without knowing what he was looking for. What time? He said quietly. Amber told him. Daniel felt something settle into place with the cold certainty of a door locking. That was almost the same minute his convoy had been hit 2 miles away, which meant the man in that car hadn't been waiting outside the restaurant by chance. He'd been watching Amber's street because he'd been tracking Daniel's movements, and Daniel, without knowing it, had walked straight into the one place being surveilled. The restaurant hadn't been random. Amber hadn't been random either. She had simply been standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now she was the only person alive who could describe the car that put a target on Daniel's back. I don't want to know anything else, Amber said, watching his face change. Whatever this is, I have a daughter. I can't. Neither did I, Daniel said. It wasn't what she expected him to say, and it stopped her. I didn't want any of this either, he went on. I didn't want to be sitting on a sidewalk with people stepping over me. I didn't want to come here and put men outside your building. I'm not asking because I want you in my world, Amber. I'm asking because I need to know how to keep you out of it. She didn't have anything to say to that. He left a few minutes later, promising nothing this time except that he'd be careful with what she'd told him. The apartment was quiet by 10. Lily was asleep. Amber was rinsing a single plate at the sink when she noticed a car. It was parked across the street, no headlights, engine off, positioned in a way that gave a clean view of the building's entrance. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself that for almost 40 minutes, until she heard the first footstep in the hallway outside her door. Then a second. Slow, careful. Someone who didn't want to be heard and wasn't quite managing it. Amber crossed the room without turning on a light and looked through the peephole. The hallway bulb had already gone dim. Someone had loosened it, she realized. A beat too late to matter. The door handle turned. Just slightly. Testing. Amber's whole body went cold. She moved fast and silent to Lily's room, gathered her half-asleep daughter against her chest, and pressed them both into the corner behind the bed, as far from the door as the room allowed. A voice came through the gap at the bottom of the door. Low, unhurried. Meant only for her. We know what you saw. Lily stirred against her shoulder. Amber pressed a hand over her daughter's ear and held her breath, heart slamming so loud she was sure it could be heard through the wall. The handle turned again. Then, from the stairwell, fast footsteps, more than one set, and the voice she recognized cutting through the dark. Get away from that door. The hallway light went out completely. The struggle in the hallway lasted less than a minute. Amber heard it through the wall. A scuffle, a body hitting the floor, a single choked-off sound that might have been pain, and then nothing but footsteps retreating fast down the stairwell. By the time she found the courage to open the door, chest still heaving, Lily still clutched against her side. The hallway was empty, except for Daniel and two of his men, and a dropped glove no one claimed. They're gone, Daniel said. They won't come back tonight. Amber didn't feel relief. She felt something closer to rage, and it came out before she could stop it. You said my daughter would be safe. She is safe. She's standing right here. She wasn't 5 minutes ago. Amber's voice cracked, and she hated that it did. Someone was outside my door, Daniel. Someone whispered to me through it. My daughter was asleep 20 feet away. She will be safe, Daniel said. Quieter this time, and it wasn't a correction. It was a promise. Deliberate, meant to land differently than the first one had. Then stop bringing your enemies to my door. He didn't argue with that. He couldn't. She was right, and he'd known it the second his car turned onto her street, and he saw the sedan parked across from her building. Whatever he'd told himself about keeping his distance, about handling this quietly from a distance, had already failed. Let me move you somewhere secure, he said. Both of you. Somewhere with real protection. Until this is finished. No, Amber. I'm not moving into some mansion with guards at the gate and a driveway I have to give a fake name to get past. She shifted Lily higher on her hip, and her daughter, half asleep, didn't stir. I don't want your world. I want to put my daughter back to bed in her own room and go to work tomorrow like a person who has a normal life. That's all I've ever wanted. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Something in his expression shifted, not retreat but recalibration, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time and adjusting for it. I grew up in a building not much different than this one, he said finally. 2 rooms, a mother who worked 2 jobs and still couldn't keep the heat on some winters. I learned early that if people thought you were weak, they came for whatever you had. So I made sure no one ever thought that again. He paused. I built everything I have on that. Fear. Because fear was the only kind of protection I trusted to hold. Amber didn't say anything. She just watched him. And then a woman, with less than I had at 12 years old, knelt down on a sidewalk and gave me the only thing she owned. Daniel said, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about why that felt like more than anything money's ever bought me. Lily lifted her head off Amber's shoulder just then, blinking awake enough to look at the stranger in the doorway. She studied him with the unfiltered attention only children managed, taking in the suit, the men in the hall, the careful way her mother was standing between them. "Are you the hungry man?" she asked. Daniel went still. "Yes." "Were you really that hungry?" A pause. "Yes." Lily nodded, satisfied, like this confirmed something she already understood about the world. "Mum gives away food when people need it. She gave the top of my birthday cake to Mrs. Alvarez last year, because Mrs. Alvarez didn't have one." Daniel looked at Amber, and whatever had been building behind his eyes settled into something quieter. This wasn't an exception she'd made for him. This was simply who she was, all the time to everyone, and he had happened to be the one sitting against the wall that night. He didn't offer her the envelope again. "I own a restaurant 3 blocks from here," he said instead. "Small, legitimate, fully, nothing attached to it that would put you at risk. It needs someone to manage it. Good pay, regular hours, benefits. I'd like it to be you." "That's charity with a job title on it." "It's not. I need someone who can run a floor and keep staff from walking out, and you've been doing exactly that for a restaurant that pays you half of what this one would." Amber hesitated. She hated how much she wanted to say yes, and hated more that wanting it felt like losing an argument with herself. "I don't want to owe you anything." "Then don't take charity," Daniel said. "Take a job." She didn't answer right away. But she didn't say no again either, and Daniel let the silence sit there without pushing it, which she noticed, and which mattered more than he probably realized. "I'll think about it," she finally said. That was enough for him tonight. He got the call from his intelligence team a little after midnight, back in the car, watching Amber's window until the light behind it finally went dark. "The sedan," his security chief said. "We traced the registration. It ran through 3 shell companies before we hit a name. Whose? One of Victor's holding companies. Buried deep, took us 6 hours to find it. But it's his." Daniel didn't say anything for a long moment. 15 years. He'd trusted the man with his life more times than he could count, and the man had, apparently, decided that wasn't worth as much as Daniel had believed. "Does he know we're looking at him?" "No, sir. He thinks he's clean." Daniel looked back toward Amber's dark window. "Good," he said. "Then that's what we're going to let him keep thinking." He needed proof, not suspicion, and suspicion alone wouldn't make a man like Victor move. But a witness might. Someone the traitor believed could identify him. Someone worth silencing. Amber didn't know it yet, but she had just become the only thing that could draw Victor Kane out of hiding. Daniel didn't like what that made her. He was going to use it anyway, carefully, and only if there was no other way to keep her safe for good. Amber just agreed to trust a man the whole city fears. Would you have said yes? This story is about to flip everything you think you know about Victor. Follow now, because Chapter 5 is where the real betrayal comes out into the open. Drop a comment with who you think the traitor really is. I want to see your guesses before the reveal. Amber said no, the first time Daniel explained it. "I'm not risking Lily just to solve your problems." They were in her kitchen, Lily asleep down the hall, and Daniel stood near the door like he understood he had no right to sit down until she told him he could. "The plan doesn't put her anywhere near this," he said. "It doesn't even put you in real danger. It puts out a story, that you remember the sedan's license plate. You don't. You never did. But if the man behind this believes you do, he has to move before I find him myself. And if he decides the easiest way to fix that problem is to make sure I can't tell anyone anything, then he walks into a restaurant full of my people believing you're alone. And he isn't." Daniel's voice didn't rise, but something in it settled harder. "I'm not asking you to be brave. I'm asking you to work a shift you were already going to work, at a restaurant I already own, surrounded by people I trust with my life. Everything else, I control." Amber crossed her arms and didn't answer for a long moment. "You said trust was the one thing you didn't have anymore," she said finally. "That's why you're doing this to your own men, isn't it? Watching all of them, waiting for the one who slips." "Yes." "Then why should I trust you not to slip?" It was a fair question, and Daniel didn't rush the answer. "Nothing happens to you," he said. "Nothing happens to your daughter. I'm not asking you to believe I'm a good man, Amber. I'm asking you to believe I keep my word. So far, I have." She studied him, the exhaustion under his eyes that hadn't fully cleared since the night on the sidewalk, the stillness he wore like armor, and something in her decided to believe him, against every reasonable instinct she had left. "Fine," she said. "But if anything happens to Lily, none of this will matter to me anymore. Not the job, not the money, not you. It won't come to that. She hoped, more than believed, that he was right. The restaurant was busy the following evening, the way it always was on a Thursday, and Amber worked her shift the way she always did. Tables, orders, the small talk regulars expected from her. If anyone had told her a week ago that she'd be doing this with 3 of Daniel Moretti's men stationed at the exits, she wouldn't have believed them either. She caught glimpses of Daniel near the back, half in shadow, watching the room without ever seeming to look directly at anything. He moved through the space like the walls belonged to him, which they did, and yet nothing about him was loud. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. A waiter dropped a tray near the kitchen door and flinched toward him before he'd even turned his head. That was the part that unsettled her most. Not the fear the room held for him, but how tired he looked underneath it. Like commanding a room without ever letting anyone close enough to see him rest was its own kind of exhausting work, one he'd been doing for so long he no longer noticed the weight of it. He watched her too, when he thought she wasn't looking, carrying plates, refilling coffee, laughing at something a regular said. Ordinary, unremarkable kindness, the same kindness she'd shown a stranger against a wall who hadn't asked for it and hadn't earned it. She hadn't known who he was that night. That was the part he kept returning to. She still would have knelt down. At 8:40, 2 men Amber didn't recognize walked in and took a booth near the window. She felt Daniel's attention sharpen from across the room before she understood why. It happened fast. The 2 men rose from the booth as Amber passed with a tray, one stepping into her path, the other moving in behind her, casual, deliberate, boxing her against the counter before she'd fully registered what was happening. Daniel was already crossing the floor, 2 of his men a step behind him, and the restaurant went quiet in the particular way. Rooms go quiet when everyone senses danger before they can name it. That's far enough, Daniel said, and the 2 men stopped. Then Victor walked in. He crossed the room without hurry, hands loose at his sides, expression arranged into concern. Boss, I heard there was a problem here. Came as soon as I could. How did you know where she was? Daniel said. The question landed flat, and Victor's practiced calm flickered. Barely, almost nothing. But Daniel had spent 15 years learning this man's face, and he saw it. Someone mentioned. Who? Victor didn't answer. Amber, still pressed against the counter, felt her pulse hammering, and then her eyes caught something small and specific. The silver ring on Victor's right hand. An unusual design. A coiled shape she'd noticed once before without understanding why it mattered. She'd seen it on the man standing beside the black sedan. Daniel, she said quietly, not moving her eyes from Victor's hand. The ring. Daniel followed her gaze, and everything in his expression went cold and still at once. Victor saw it happen. He saw the exact moment Daniel understood. Victor, Daniel said, very quietly. 15 years. Victor's hand moved to his jacket. Gun. Someone shouted, and the room broke apart. Chairs scraping. A woman screaming near the door. Daniel's men surging forward as Victor pulled the weapon free and fired once into the ceiling, buying himself a path to the exit. Amber was shoved sideways, caught between the counter and the chaos, Daniel's arms suddenly around her, pulling her down and out of the line of anything else Victor might fire. By the time the restaurant went still again, Victor was gone. He'd stopped once at the door, just long enough to look back at Daniel. You think this ends with me? Then he was through it, into the dark, and gone. Daniel stood in the wreckage of overturned chairs, one arm still braced protectively around Amber, staring at the door Victor had disappeared through. 15 years of loyalty had just confirmed itself as the deepest betrayal of his life, and something in the way Victor had said those last 5 words told Daniel this wasn't close to finished. By dawn, Daniel had a location. One of his men had traced a call. Victor made an hour after fleeing the restaurant, routed through 3 burner numbers to a warehouse on the industrial edge of the city, the kind of place Daniel himself had used more than once for meetings he didn't want witnessed. Victor knew that. He'd chosen it deliberately, a message wrapped inside a location. I learned everything I know from you. But it was the second piece of intelligence that made Daniel's hands go still on the table. He knows about the daughter, his security chief said. One of our people intercepted a message Victor sent this morning. He's planning to use her as leverage if the meeting doesn't go his way. Something shifted behind Daniel's eyes. Not the cold, controlled calculation Amber had watched him wear at the restaurant, but something faster, hotter, closer to the surface. "Get the car," he said. "Now, boss. If we move without a plan," I said now. He was already through the door, and it was only Amber's voice, sharp behind him, that stopped him on the stairwell. "Daniel." He turned. She'd followed him out, still in the clothes she'd slept in, fear plain on her face, but something steadier underneath it too. "They told me," she said, "about Lily. I'm handling it. You're about to walk in there and become exactly the kind of man who put a gun to a 9-year-old's future." Amber said, "That's not handling it. That's revenge with better tailoring." Daniel's jaw tightened. He threatened my. He stopped himself before the word landed, and Amber watched it happen, watched him catch himself, reaching for a word he hadn't expected to reach for. "If you become the man you're fighting," Amber said quietly, "then none of this means anything. Not the restaurant. Not the promise you made me. None of it." He stood there for a long moment, the rage still sitting hot in his chest, and slowly let it settle into something he could use instead of something that would use him. "Then help me end it the right way," he said. Amber didn't ask to be left behind, and Daniel, for the first time since this began, didn't try to make her. "Victor's men," she said in the car. "The ones who came to the restaurant, the ones who followed me, they always came from the same direction. East, past the old rail yard. I noticed it because it's the same road the delivery trucks use, and there's only one warehouse district that direction that's still standing." Daniel's security chief pulled up satellite images. 3 warehouses matched. Amber studied them and pointed to the second without hesitation. "The one with the loading dock facing away from the street. The kind of building you choose specifically because no one could see in." "That one," she said. "It's the only one with lights on this early." She was right. Daniel didn't say so out loud, but the look he gave her said enough. This was no longer a woman he was protecting from the edges of his world. She was standing inside it now, useful and unafraid. And he found he trusted her judgment more than he trusted most of the men waiting for him at the warehouse. Victor was waiting when they arrived, alone in the center of the empty floor, exactly as arranged. "You brought her," Victor said, glancing at Amber with something between amusement and disdain. "Sentimental. I didn't expect that from you." "Why?" Daniel said. He didn't raise his voice. He never did. 15 years, Victor. "Why?" Victor's composure, the same calm that had made him impossible to suspect for so long, finally cracked open. "Because you were never going to give me what I earn," he said. "I built half of what you have. I ran your territories while you sat in meetings shaking hands with men who feared your name and not your work. I decided it was time the man doing the building got to own it. So you tried to kill me. I tried to replace you. There's a difference if you'd let yourself see it. And the woman I fed," Daniel said, glancing once at Amber, "what was she to your plan?" "An accident," Victor said. "She saw the car. I couldn't take the risk that she'd remember more than she did. I had her watched. That's all that ever was. Insurance in case she became a problem. She almost became one because of you," Daniel said. "Because your men came to her door in the middle of the night and terrified an 8-year-old girl." Victor didn't apologize. He didn't seem to think he owed one. The confrontation that followed wasn't long, and it wasn't clean. Years of controlled fury breaking loose all at once, Daniel's restraint finally giving way to something physical, direct. Years of unspoken betrayal settled in a handful of seconds. Victor fought back hard, the way a man fights when he has nothing left to protect. But Daniel had built his life on being underestimated by no one, and it ended with Victor on the ground, beaten but alive, exactly as Daniel had decided it would before he'd ever walked through the door. His men arrived moments later, flooding the warehouse, weapons drawn, ready for whatever order Daniel gave. He looked down at Victor for a long moment. The old Daniel would have ended this here, quietly, permanently, the way the city had always understood these things to end. "Take him to the police," Daniel said instead, "with everything. The recordings, the shell company records, all of it. Let the law finish what I started." His security chief hesitated. "Boss, are you certain I said the police?" Daniel didn't look away from Victor. "I don't need to be the only kind of justice the city has left." Later, back at Amber's building, Daniel stood in her doorway one more time, not with SUVs this time, not with bodyguards crowding the hallway, just him, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the fight. "You're free," he said. No debt, no obligation. Whatever protection you've had, you're free to walk away from it if that's what you want. Amber studied him for a moment before she asked the only thing that still mattered. What about Lily? She'll always be safe, Daniel said. That was never conditional on anything you decide about me. Amber searched his face for the catch, the fine print, the thing men like him usually left unsaid. There wasn't one. She realized, standing there in her own doorway, that for the first time since this began, he meant exactly what he said, and nothing more. 6 weeks passed before the city stopped talking about Victor Kane. The trial moved fast once the recordings surfaced. Faster than Daniel had expected, and faster, he suspected, than Victor had ever imagined possible for a man who had spent 15 years believing the law was something other people answered to. Daniel didn't attend the sentencing. He sent no message, made no statement. He had already said everything he needed to say in that warehouse, and none of it required an audience. What changed instead was quieter, and it happened in rooms no reporter ever saw. Daniel spent those weeks doing something he hadn't done in years, looking, really looking, at the men around him. 2 more were gone by the end of the first month. Not from violence, but from simple removal. Men who had learned under Victor that loyalty was something you performed rather than something you meant. In their place, Daniel expanded what had always been the smaller, cleaner half of his world. The restaurants, the small logistics firm, the construction contracts that didn't need anyone's silence bought to stay legal. He didn't measure a man's worth by how quickly he flinched anymore. He'd learned that lesson on a sidewalk, from a woman who owed him nothing and gave him everything she had anyway. Amber took the job. She'd turned it over for 3 days before she said yes, turning it the way she turned over everything that mattered. Carefully, from every angle, looking for the string attached that would eventually pull tight. She never found one. The restaurant ran clean, the pay was real, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she came home most nights before Lily was asleep instead of after. They moved in March, into a 2-bedroom on a street with working streetlights and a landlord who fixed things when you called him. Lily got her own room, small with a window that faced east, and she'd stood in the doorway of it the first night with an expression Amber would carry with her for the rest of her life. Pure, uncomplicated wonder. Like she'd been handed something she hadn't known was allowed to want. Amber didn't buy herself much. A better winter coat. Shoes that didn't leave her feet aching by the end of a shift. She kept working. Because the job was hers and she liked being good at it. And because money that came without effort had always felt to her like it belonged to someone else. For there was one thing from the old apartment she brought with her that had no practical use at all. A foam takeout container, empty, slightly crushed at one corner, that she kept in the back of a kitchen drawer where no one but her ever looked. She never told Daniel about it. She didn't need to. He came by on a Thursday in April. No call ahead, no black SUVs idling at the curb the way there once had been. Just Daniel, in a plain jacket, carrying 2 paper grocery bags up 3 flights of stairs like a man who did that sort of thing regularly, which he did not. Amber opened the door and looked at the bags before she looked at him. "You know I can buy my own food now," she said. "I know." He held them out anyway, and after a moment she took them because refusing would have meant a conversation neither of them wanted to have on the doorstep, and because some part of her had missed the particular shape of his stubbornness. Lily heard his voice from the kitchen and came running before Amber had even shut the door, skidding to a stop in her socked feet, staring up at him with the same open, unfiltered attention she'd given him once before. In a hallway, half asleep. "You're the hungry man," she said, delighted, like she'd solved something. "I am," Daniel said. She turned and disappeared back into the kitchen without another word and returned a moment later with her own plate. Spaghetti, most of it still on it, one meatball already missing, and pushed it toward him with both hands the way a child offers something without any sense that it might be a strange thing to offer a grown man in a nice coat. "You can have some of mine," she said, "in case you're still hungry." Daniel didn't move for a long moment. He was looking at the plate, but he wasn't seeing it. He was seeing a container held out to him against a brick wall, a woman's voice telling him it wasn't hers anymore. The particular cold of a night when he'd had nothing, and a stranger had decided that mattered. He'd built an empire out of the belief that no one gave anything away without expecting something larger back. He had been so certain of that once, that it had shaped every decision he'd made for 20 years. He looked up at Amber. She said nothing. She only smiled, the way she had that first night. Like this was simply the ordinary shape of who they were and always had been. "Thank you," Daniel said to Lily, and took the plate and ate. Later, after Lily had gone to bed with the story half finished and a promise of the rest tomorrow, Daniel sat across the small kitchen table from Amber, the takeout bags emptied, the dishes drying by the sink. "Before you," he said, "I believed everyone had a price. I built my whole life around that idea. It made me careful. It made me hard to fool." He turned his water glass slowly between his hands. "You proved me wrong." "What did I give you?" Amber asked. "That you couldn't just buy." He looked toward the hallway, toward Lily's door, still cracked open, the small lamp inside still glowing. "A reason to believe people can still be good." Amber didn't answer that. She didn't need to. She reached over and refilled his glass instead, the way she might have for anyone at her table. And for a while, neither of them said anything else, because nothing else needed saying. She had thought that freezing night outside the restaurant, that she was giving away her last meal. She never realized she was giving a hungry stranger the first reason he'd had in years to become a different man. Amber thought she was giving away her last meal that night. She never imagined she was giving a stranger a reason to change. If this story moved you, that's exactly why I write them. Follow for more stories like this one, where small kindness quietly rewrites everything. Comment "Table for 3" if this ending stayed with you, and tell me which chapter hit you hardest.